So I thought I'd make a video here, my little homeless spot, sleeping. Wake up early in the morning, do my normal routine. But I thought I'd make a video because there were some things on my mind, and I was thinking, I suspected this before somebody had told me something. I was in Providence, Rhode Island. There was an Asian guy that said something that his mom was 104 or something like that, and his mom had passed away, and that kind of encouraged the situation to make me more believe this. But I had thought about this a long time ago, and I thought, why I didn't think about this before? And I thought, if my father was a biological twin, then that means that his mother probably wasn't his biological mother, because why would you separate identical twins and it be the biological mother unless she absolutely in a position that she has to? The same way that my mother felt like she had to with my father, who wasn't the biological father, which means I knew Joe was not the biological father. I didn't know, I never questioned his sexuality or anything, but he was just grandpa to me, and he was a good guy, or at least that's how I saw him. Of everything that happened, him dying after me, what happened to me, my brother, his son. Anyway, and I was thinking to myself, is my grandma, because my mom, it makes me think, if this lady, my grandma, Joe's wife, my dad's mother, was a transgender, and I didn't know, that explains so much of how my mother behaved and what she told me, because she spoke stories to me about her, and I'll have to make a video whenever I'm in a little bit better setting. But it makes me understand my mother more, because how she's having to pivot and try to survive in the circumstances of no education, foreign immigrant, you don't have anything. This is 1970s. There's no cell phones. Life is at the hardest of the worst you can imagine, especially for a young girl and woman having children. And I thought, it's one of the things that really pisses me off about whatever surprise identical reunited twins they did, because that was always something that the minute that I ever had the opportunity, that I was going to be looking for my father's biological twin, because I knew he was. But there was no resources. You got to understand, I'm broke. I'm trying to survive on my own. But it was something that if I knew that somebody had reunited Julian with his twin and my mom and her triplets, that is the absolute first thing I would have said. Dad has a twin. Look for him. He has an identical twin. That's exactly what I would have said and done before he died. Unfortunately, they never reunited. His biological twin. There's 1% chance it wasn't, but I feel like 100% on this. There's no doubt in my mind that it was. And I think that if he was a biological twin, who else was a biological twin? You know who else I think is a biological twin? Is Richard Palomo, my uncle Richard Palomo. I think he's a possible, because he looks a lot like my father, but he's like the opposite. He's completely really white complected. He's like really pale skin. And because he looks exactly like my father. He does. I mean, me and Julian talked about it, and Frankie did as well. We were like, dang, he looks just like Dad. But he's like white. But I think it's a good chance. I bet you he has an identical twin as well. I think he does. I met a guy, talked about this many years ago. I saw him a couple of times. This guy looked, it was pretty close to him, but I think it was. There's no way in telling, because how many people look like each other, right? But I know it's kind of difficult to see right now, and it's kind of dark. Got my Auschwitz hat, foreign hat, but and I was thinking, I was like, golly. But the weird, crazy thing is, there's always bad to I'm not trying to glorify the situation, because my dad used to always told me numbers of times, talked about it with even family members, and there were certain subjects that when he talked about something, it still bothered him to that day. And he used to say that his dad, they were really well off. He said they were well off better a lot than a lot of kids. They were poor, but they were somewhat well off, as my dad expressed. They got to have a TV, when he was like 11 or 12 years old. They had to wait a couple years for it to come out, and they used to, stay tuned to the radio, and that's how they got their information. But I was thinking, I was like, my father saying that he used to be very scared because he used to come home drunk all the time and beat the shit out of his wife. And when he's talked about beat her up, like, it wasn't like a slap a couple of times. He said that he said that all the kids, the kids would get very scared and all run into the room and underneath the bed, like a really bad family, destructive, abusive life and family, where the father comes home pissed drunk after work, and he would beat the hell out of his wife. And I talked about this story that the Uncle Robert, that molested me and my brother, that he was the older one, and he was the one that actually stopped that from happening, which I don't know if she was a transgender or not, but I know transgenders get beaten. I know sexual abuse and all that other stuff still happens within the gay community. But it was just a different time and different era. But it makes me understand my mother and how the stories that she told me and how I can relate them to how she was trying to pivot and survive, and how she really felt about the circumstances. Because a lot of people won't tell you how they feel. They're just trying to make it through the day. They're just trying to make it through life. And you shouldn't have to live like that, but that's exactly what it makes even more sense now. Because my mom told me that she learned how to cook through my grandma. But anyway, so I thought I'd make a video on that, and I was thinking, I was like, damn, because there's no way you would have separated those twins. If he was well off in that family, there would have been no reason. That means that she had to have been a transgender. At least I believe that. At least I believe that. At least I think that she was. I don't know. You'd have to ask other people and find out. But, I mean, unless she had to give up a child, which I don't believe that was. And the reason I don't think that was is because, it's very unlikely that, since there were so many brothers, and there were so many brothers and sisters living all in the same house, and they were all from different biological fathers, that my father would have been an identical twin and split up at birth or snatched. It's a possibility. But I thought I'd talk about that because it makes me think. That I think that's I'm sure there's a history to that, how that all works, because straight men in the world, we're just considered as breeding animals. That's all we are. And back then, how people will survive is that your reproductive system is what gets you a family. The money buys you the family. If you don't have that reproductive system, you can't make human life, period. And you also go out of business with your own cloth if you don't continue that cycle for life to continue that way. It's the only way that it can happen. Because you have too many, you have other transgenders be born, and then they can't have children, and they don't have, but in order for it to be possible, that's the only way that it can happen. And so people getting jobs and doing all that other stuff was probably the same way back then. They used women as breeding animals, and used men, and bastardized men, to only screw women and get them pregnant and then take off, And that's how we're bred into this world. So the gays sell the women for sex. I can't even imagine. It seems like such a nightmare thinking that women are just being bastardized and shit, and just giving birth and giving babies to transgenders and gays and your life doesn't even matter. The only way that you survive is just having people giving birth. That's what you are. That's all you were. You don't even get to keep the babies. But sounds like a nightmare story, but anyway, I thought I'd talk about it. It's kind of mixed emotions. It's not like I'm pissed off, or anything like that. But it is kind of like, wow, so shit, you know. It's like, my dad's a biological twin, and he never reunited with his twin, separated at birth. The only way that could have happened is if that wasn't his biological mother. I know that wasn't his biological father, but if that wasn't his biological mother, kind of makes you think.